It began the morning after the funeral, when the scent of lilies still lingered in the air and grief had not yet learned to speak. Emily Parker thought the worst was behind her until her husband smiled across the table and said, almost tenderly, "We will share your father's $2 million with my mother." In that instant, the world tilted. What followed was not just betrayal, but revelation, the unraveling of love, the awakening of strength, and the quiet, merciless truth that time always reveals who we truly are. Rain traced thin silver lines across a field of black umbrellas, and Emily Parker stood motionless beneath one of them, a single white rose cupped in her trembling hand. The air smelled of wet cedar and lilies. A low bell tolled from the chapel, steady as a heartbeat, and each strike seemed to press her further into the earth. She raised the rose to her lips, let its cold petals touch her breath, and laid it gently upon the polished wood. The inscription on the brass nameplate blurred through a film of rain and tears. Dr. Harold Parker. Father. Anchor. Light. Behind her, shoes shifted on gravel. A cough. The brief chirp of a phone unlocking. Ryan Cooper, her husband, lowered his screen when he caught the glance of a distant cousin, then slipped the device into his pocket as if it had never left. Linda, his mother, leaned toward him with a lacquered smile. Her whisper moved like a draft that should not belong at a graveside. Emily did not catch the words. She did not need to. She felt the small cold of them, as if someone had opened a window in January. The service closed. Muffled condolences met her shoulders like gentle taps, a procession of hands and faces. Emily thanked each voice with the quiet that grief allows. When the crowd thinned and the umbrellas folded, the cemetery became a slate painting. Emily lingered. She traced the damp seam of the casket with a fingertip, then pressed her palm to the wood, as if a farewell could still move through it. She walked back alone. The Parker house sat in a modest, tree-lined street on the edge of Portland, where the rain made everything greener than memory. Inside, the air was still and familiar, the smell of paper, ink, and lemon oil that had always marked her father's study. She crossed the threshold without turning on a light. Shadows were honest. They made no promises. At the desk, the top drawer resisted and then surrendered with a sigh. Under an orderly stack of prescriptions and a worn leather notebook lay a small mahogany box. Emily knew it. As a child, she had watched her father lift that lid and wind whatever secret ticked within. Her hands hesitated, then opened the box. A vintage pocket watch rested on a cradle of dark velvet. The metal held the soft glow of age. She lifted it by its chain, and it swung with a gentle gravity, warm from years of palms that no longer could warm it. On the back, an engraving she had not seen since childhood caught the lamp's dim reach. Time reveals truth. Harold Parker's careful script beneath it, almost a smile in metal. She let the watch settle into her palm, its face breathing a measured rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. The sound entered the room and put the furniture in order. A steady sound against a day that had been anything but steady. Emily closed her eyes. For a breath and then another, the rain and the bell and the edges of the world fell away. Across from the desk, the glass of the bookcase returned a ghostly image. She stepped closer and met her own reflection. The dress that felt too formal for her skin. The red at the rim of her eyes. The set of her mouth that looked so much like her father when he held a line. She held the watch near her heart and spoke to the woman in the glass. "You always said love meant patience," she whispered. Did I take that too far? No answer came. Only the rain, the watch, and the knowledge that patience has a cost. The sound of laughter rose unbidden, as if someone had lifted the needle onto a different record. A diner years earlier. Warm light in a chrome cradle, the hum of a milkshake mixer, the easy swing of a door. Emily sat in a booth with a shy smile and a practical haircut. Across from her, Ryan listened with an earnest tilt of the head that had once disarmed her. She had just told a story about a patient who had brought her father a blueberry pie every Thanksgiving. "He sounds like a man who casts a long shadow," Ryan said. He was not mocking. He was measuring. "You will learn to walk beside it, not under it," she replied, laughing at her own audacity. He laughed too, reached for her hand, and did not let go. A montage followed in memory's gentle pace. The aisle, roses white as breath, a promise spoken into a future that seemed as clean as linen. A key turning in a new door, light spilling across hardwood floors, her father smiling in the doorway with a gift she had struggled to accept, the down payment that turned an apartment into a home. Dinners that were humble and content, a coffee mug with 2 toothbrushes tucked inside it, a photograph on the mantel with 3 small figures pressed together and lit by a winter sun. The picture dissolved. The same condo now, but the light had changed. The room was dim. Outside, the rain had hardened from silver threads to glass beads. Emily set the pocket watch on the dining table and listened to it count a path through the evening. She placed plates and folded napkins with the care of someone who has not yet learned how to move without purpose. Ryan entered with a careful expression, the one he used when he knew a room required gentleness. He hung his jacket with a weight that did not belong to fabric and took his chair. The scrape of wood on wood felt too loud. He reached for the bread, then paused. "Did your dad's lawyer say anything about arrangements?" His voice was even, but evenness can be a kind of mask. Emily lifted her eyes. The question was not a cruelty. It was a blade wrapped in cloth. She watched the cloth fall away. He looked past her, past the watch, as if there were something on the wall that required attention. She did not answer. She placed a piece of bread on his plate, and the quiet passed between them like a narrow bridge that might hold if neither spoke. His gaze flickered to the pocket watch. A bee might have flown between them. The second hand moved, modest and objective, obeying a law that does not alter for grief. He tried again, this time with a smile that pressed the corners of his mouth but not his eyes. "I am only thinking of practical matters. There will be forms. There will be timelines. It may help to plan." She moved the watch closer to her, a small and nearly invisible act. The chain chimed against porcelain. Ryan's eyes followed the sound. For a moment, his expression shifted, something like uncertainty or discomfort. Then it was gone. The meal unfolded in quiet bites and folded hands. Linda's message arrived with a single chime on his phone, which he did not open, then did. Emily fixed her gaze on the watch face so that she would not ask to see the screen. She pressed her tongue against the roof of her mouth and kept her silence in place, thread by thread, stitch by stitch. Later, when the dishes were done and the house had returned to shadow, Emily sat alone in the living room. She placed the pocket watch on the arm of the chair and listened to it pronounce each second as if each second were a bead sliding on a wire. She thought of her father at his desk, the way his hand would pause over a page when he chose a word. She thought of kindness as a habit rather than a miracle. She thought of patience and where it ends. In the window, her reflection floated over the city lights, a faint double of a woman who was learning the shape of absence. She touched the glass with 2 fingers and felt only the cold. That night, she understood something she had never named. Words can fail. Some days do not deserve them. Some truths arrive in the clockwork of a room, in the angle of a shoulder, in the way a question insists on its own timing. She lifted the watch, wound it once, and set it on the nightstand. The room darkened around its small circle of light. The second hand continued, patient and incorruptible. That night, she realized silence can scream louder than words. The next morning unfolded in a hush that felt unnatural. Light slipped through the blinds in thin, gold bars, resting on the documents spread across the table like scattered pieces of someone else's life. Emily Parker sat perfectly still, the ticking of her father's pocket watch measuring every heartbeat she could not hear. Across from her, Mr. Cole, her father's longtime lawyer, adjusted his glasses. His voice was steady, precise, carrying the weight of formality. "Your father was a careful man, Mrs. Cooper. His estate totals a little over $2 million, including savings, bonds, and the Portland property. All of it, by his will, is left solely to you." The air seemed to thin around her. Emily nodded, unable to speak. Gratitude mingled with sorrow until the two became indistinguishable. She traced the embossed lettering on the Folder estate of Harold Parker and thought how strange it was that love could be reduced to paperwork and signatures. Mr. Cole's tone softened. "He wanted you to have peace. He mentioned it often." Peace. The words settled somewhere unreachable. Emily closed the folder and whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the wind pressed against the office windows, rattling faintly like fingertips seeking entry. When she returned home, the silence was no longer gentle. It had teeth. Ryan was already there, sitting at the dining table with a cup of coffee untouched before him. The faint steam between them felt like a ghost trying to disappear. His eyes moved to the folder in her hands. "So, it's settled?" Emily placed it down without answering. He opened it as if it were his own mail, scanning the pages quickly, lips parting in quiet disbelief. "2 million, he murmured. "Emily, this changes everything. We could finally breathe. You, me, Mom, like one big family again." Her breath caught on the word again. "You mean you and your mother," she said softly. Ryan gave a nervous laugh, running his fingers through his hair, that familiar gesture he used when he wanted to appear harmless. "Come on, don't make it sound like that. It's not just about money. We could help her. You know how hard it's been since Dad left." Emily turned away, her voice measured. "My father just died, Ryan." He sighed, setting the folder down as if it were a burden too heavy for him. "I know. I'm only thinking about our future." Her eyes drifted to the pocket watch on the counter, its steady rhythm filling the pause between them. Tick, tick, tick. The sound felt like her father's reply in a language Ryan would never understand. That evening, Linda arrived uninvited. Her perfume filled the hallway before her voice did. "Emily, darling, how are you holding up?" She offered a smile that never touched her eyes. They gathered for dinner. The table glowed under warm light, the dishes lined like soldiers on parade. Linda's gaze swept across the apartment, the wine cabinet, the art, the oak floors, and lingered on the photograph of Harold Parker on the mantel. "Your father was quite the provider," she said, slicing her steak with delicate precision. "Not everyone's lucky enough to have that kind of start." Emily set her knife down, the motion careful, deliberate. "He worked hard for it." "Oh, of course," Linda replied. "It must be a comfort knowing his success will keep you both comfortable." Ryan looked up quickly. "Mom, stop. She's still grieving." Then, after a pause that betrayed him, he added, "But maybe Dad Parker would have wanted us all to live comfortably." The fork slipped from Emily's fingers, clattering softly against the plate. The sound was small, but it cracked something open inside her. She raised her eyes slowly. Ryan's face was calm, too calm, as if the sentence had already been rehearsed. Dinner continued with the rhythm of polite conversation, but every word seemed to carry a weight it should not have had. When it ended, Linda kissed Emily on the cheek lightly, perfunctorily, and whispered, "Take care of my son." Emily stood at the sink after they left, water running over her hands until it turned lukewarm. The pocket watch on the counter ticked behind her, its sound no longer comforting but insistent, as if marking the seconds of her restraint. Later that night, unable to sleep, she opened her laptop and typed into the search bar, "Inheritance law between spouses." The cursor blinked like a metronome beside her thoughts. Legal websites unfolded before her in neat, clinical language. She read about marital property, separate estates, and the rights of next of kin. Her eyes paused on one line. Assets inherited from a deceased parent remain the sole property of the heir unless deliberately shared. She leaned back, letting the words sink in. Sole property. Her father had not only left her his fortune, he had left her protection. The watch continued its patient count of time. In its rhythm, she heard her father's voice, gentle but firm. "Do not confuse kindness with weakness, Emily." "Maybe I have," she whispered. "Maybe I thought love and law were built from the same honesty." When Ryan came to bed, the room was dim. The city lights made slow waves across the ceiling. He lay beside her, the scent of cologne mixed with something faintly metallic, like guilt. "I know today was a lot," he said, his voice low. "You know, I loved you for you. But sometimes it feels like I'm competing with your father's ghost." Emily turned toward him, startled by the confession. For a moment, compassion threatened to rise. "Ryan." He exhaled, and the vulnerability vanished. "Maybe splitting it with Mom makes things fair," he added, almost gently. Her heart went still. In that instant, she saw it all: the small compromises, the excuses, the way love had been traded for convenience, one quiet day at a time. She turned away before he could see her tears. The window reflected her faint outline, a silhouette more real than the body she inhabited. The night hummed with the ticking of the watch on her nightstand. She closed her eyes, hearing each second as if it were counting something that had just died. That was the last night she cried for him. The morning light filtered through the blinds in narrow, fractured bands, cutting across the dining table where the inheritance documents still lay. The air was heavy with the scent of coffee gone cold. Emily sat before them, unmoving, her father's pocket watch ticking beside the papers like a quiet metronome, keeping time for a decision that had already been made. She reached for her phone and opened her banking app. The balance in their joint account blinked back at her, almost empty. She inhaled deeply, her chest tightening, then began transferring what little remained into an account under her name. Her fingers did not tremble. The action was mechanical, deliberate. Each number entered was a quiet declaration enough. Later that day, she visited Mr. Cole again. The lawyer's office was quiet, sunlight falling in gentle rectangles across the polished wood of his desk. "I need to separate everything," she said simply. "Every account. Every asset. My father's inheritance must remain untouchable." Mr. Cole nodded slowly. "Your father anticipated this, Mrs. Cooper." He reached into a file and handed her a small velvet pouch. "He left this for you. Said you would know when it was time to open it." Emily accepted it with both hands. Inside was a folded letter, sealed with the faint imprint of her father's initials. The paper was thin, the ink faintly indented by a hand she had not seen in months. She opened it carefully, afraid the air itself might bruise it. "Emily, when people show you who they are, believe them. You have your mother's heart, kind, patient, but mine too. Do not let love silence your instincts. Protect your peace. That is my true inheritance to you. Dad." Her throat constricted. For a long moment, she simply stared at the handwriting, the curves of each letter, the quiet authority of his words. The world around her faded. In the stillness, she heard his voice as clearly as if he were sitting across from her, calm, unwavering, reminding her that truth was never loud, it was steady. She folded the letter, placed it inside the watch case, and closed it with a soft click. The sound was final, like the closing of a door. The weeks that followed were a blur of extravagance and decay. Ryan quit his job, claiming he needed time to plan the next chapter. Linda filled that chapter for him. Shopping bags appeared in the hallway, designer logos gleaming under the light. Wine bottles clinked in the recycling bin. Their laughter echoed down the apartment corridors, false and brittle. Emily watched in silence as the walls of her home filled with the noise of their greed. Her eyes followed Ryan one evening as he uncorked another expensive bottle of wine, his mother draped in a new silk scarf. "This one was only $900, Linda said proudly, admiring her reflection in the window. Ryan grinned. "Worth every cent. Dad. Parker would have wanted us to live well, right, Em?" Emily looked up from her seat. "My father wanted me to live honestly." The words struck the air like a slap. The room fell still for a moment before Linda laughed, brittle and artificial. "You should not take everything so personally, dear. Family means sharing." Emily turned away before they could see the storm rising in her eyes. That night, she sat alone in her study, the city outside painted in neon and rain. The pocket watch ticked steadily on the desk, its reflection trembling in the glass of her phone. She opened the joint account again. The number was nearly 0. The rhythm of the ticking grew louder in her ears until it felt like the pulse of her own heart. She rose, opened her laptop, and began transferring every legal and financial document into her private folders. Then, slowly, deliberately, she wrote a new email to Mr. Cole. "Proceed with the divorce papers." When she finished, she placed the watch in front of her. The ticking seemed faster now, almost urgent. She whispered, "I am ready, Dad." 2 days later, Ryan and Linda left for Hawaii, a celebration of their imagined fortune. Their suitcases rolled down the hallway like the sound of a final act beginning. Emily stood at the door, watching them with a calm expression that neither of them noticed. When the elevator doors closed, she turned the locks one by one. The metallic clicks sounded like punctuation marks to the story she was rewriting. That evening, she gathered every reminder of their shared life photographs, letters, gifts, and packed them neatly into a box. She carried it to the basement storage, leaving it beside a stack of forgotten furniture. When she returned upstairs, she looked around the empty apartment. It was quiet again, but not the fragile quiet of grief. It was a deeper silence, solid and absolute. She placed the pocket watch at the center of the table. Its ticking filled the space like a countdown. A week later, a furious knocking shattered the calm. Emily glanced at the intercom monitor and saw Ryan and Linda standing at the door, their bright Hawaiian shirts garish against their pale faces. "Emily, why will the door not open?" Ryan shouted, his voice muffled through the glass. She pressed the button, her tone calm. "Because I changed the locks." "What? Are you insane? Let us in so we can talk." "No," she said simply. "You can meet me at the cafe across the street." The cafe was half empty, sunlight bleeding across the floor. Emily arrived last, composed, her hair pulled back, her face unreadable. Ryan and Linda were waiting, anger radiating from them like heat. Ryan slammed his hand on the table the moment she sat down. "What is this? Some kind of game? You cannot just lock us out of our home." "Our home," Emily repeated softly. "It was never yours." Linda leaned forward, her voice sharp. "How dare you speak to him like that? After everything he has done for you, Dash." Emily interrupted, sliding a thin envelope across the table. "Divorce papers. Sign them." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You cannot walk away with everything. You do not get to take it all." She met his eyes, her voice low but steady. "You already did. You walked away from me long before the money." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Ryan struck the table and coffee spilled between them, spreading across the surface like a dark mirror. Emily did not flinch. She picked up her phone, unlocked it, and placed it beside the puddle. On the screen was a section of legal text highlighted in yellow. She turned it toward him. "Inheritance law," she said evenly. "What I received from my father is separate property. It cannot be divided. You should have read more than my emails." Linda's lipstick smudged as she opened and closed her mouth, unable to form words. Ryan stared at the screen, disbelief draining the color from his face. The cafe's hum faded to silence. Emily stood. "You will both leave the apartment today. I will send your things later." Ryan's shoulders sagged. For the first time, his voice trembled. "Please, Emily, you cannot do this. I have nothing." She looked at him for a long moment, not with hatred, but with clarity. "You made sure of that yourself." She turned and walked away, the soft jingle of the cafe door punctuating the end of a chapter. Outside, the afternoon light fell warm across her face. The watch in her pocket ticked steadily, its rhythm no longer a countdown but a pulse steady, alive, her own. For the first time, she saw fear in their eyes not because they had lost money, but because they had lost control. The first dawn after the storm arrived without ceremony. The city outside Emily's window was waking, yet her apartment remained wrapped in the hush that follows endings. The air was still, the silence almost too large for one person to bear. She lay on her back, eyes tracing the soft fractures of morning light on the ceiling. The bed, once divided by presence and absence, now felt impossibly vast. She turned to the nightstand. Her father's pocket watch rested there, the faint ticking echoing like a heartbeat in the hollow room. She reached for it, the cool metal pressing into her palm. Winning did not feel like victory, she thought. It felt like silence. Emily rose and crossed to the window. The glass reflected her faint silhouette, pale against the fading skyline. The city lights dimmed one by one, dissolving into a soft gray dawn. She pressed her fingers to the glass. It was cold, but familiar, like the memory of a life she had already lived and shed. Below, the streets began to stir, trucks humming, footsteps quick against the pavement. People were beginning again. She realized, with quiet certainty, that so was she. The following weeks unfolded like pages turning in slow motion. The divorce papers were processed. Her lawyer called to confirm the separation of accounts. The condo once filled with laughter, tension, and the rustle of betrayal was now stripped bare. Ryan and Linda had vanished from her immediate world, but fragments of their aftermath reached her like echoes through walls. The news came not from gossip, but from the silent trail of consequences that always follows greed. A foreclosure notice appeared in the mail addressed to former tenants. Her lawyer mentioned, almost in passing, that Ryan's credit accounts were frozen. But the image that lingered most came weeks later, when she saw him by chance. It was at a small cafe near downtown one she and her father had once visited after her graduation. She stopped at the window unseen as the late afternoon sun fell across the sidewalk. Inside, Ryan sat at a corner table, his hands rough, his shirt stained with the gray dust of construction work. His back curved slightly, as if the weight of his choices had settled there permanently. He was staring at something on the table, a small, crumpled photograph of the two of them. For a moment, Emily thought he might smile. Instead, he folded the picture carefully and slipped it back into his pocket. The gesture was gentle, almost tender, and it pierced her in a place she thought had gone numb. She did not hate him anymore. What she felt was something quieter and understanding that sorrow, too, has its limits. She stepped away from the window and kept walking. A month later, she packed her last box and left the apartment. Her new home, her father's old house, waited on a quiet street lined with oaks. The air there smelled of pine and rain, the kind of air that asked nothing of her. When she opened the front door, the faint creak of the hinges greeted her like an old friend. The house was exactly as she remembered: shelves of books, her father's desk near the window, and the scent of paper that had once clung to his white coat. Dust caught the sunlight in gentle spirals, and she felt, for the first time in years, that she was stepping not backward but forward into something whole. She unpacked slowly. Every gesture was a ritual. The watch placed on the mantel, her father's photograph set beside it, a vase of fresh lilies on the windowsill. Days passed gently. Emily found herself waking early, walking to the local community clinic where her father had once volunteered. The scent of antiseptic and coffee mixed in the halls. She began helping with patient intake, her quiet voice soothing those who came seeking care they could barely afford. The work filled her hands, but more than that, it filled her silence. She discovered that purpose, once reclaimed, could heal more completely than vengeance ever could. Each morning before she left, she fastened the pocket watch to her wrist. The chain brushed against her skin, its rhythm a private conversation between her and the past. Tick, tick, tick. Her father's legacy had never been the money, it was the steadiness, the quiet integrity that outlasted betrayal. On a Sunday morning, she returned to the cemetery. The sky was pale gold, the air crisp with the scent of early spring. She knelt before her father's grave, the earth soft beneath her knees. A small bouquet of white lilies rested in her hand. Beside them, she placed the pocket watch for a moment, its surface catching the sunlight. She watched it gleam and thought of the years she had spent chasing peace when all along it had been something she could choose. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely above the rustle of leaves, "you are right. Time really does reveal the truth." Her eyes lifted toward the horizon. The world around her seemed newly drawn, the colors sharper, the sounds clearer. The pain was still there, but it no longer ruled her. It had softened into memory, into gratitude, into something almost sacred. She stayed a while longer, letting the wind brush against her face. Then, gently, she picked up the watch, wound it once, and closed it with a click that echoed like a heartbeat. That evening, the house glowed with the soft light of lamps. She brewed tea, the scent of chamomile drifting through the quiet rooms. Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle as breath on glass. Emily stood at the window, watching the droplets race each other down the pane. Her reflection shimmered in the glass, no longer the woman who had once begged for patience, but someone reborn through it. She smiled faintly. The clock on the mantel chimed once, and somewhere in that sound, her father's voice seemed to whisper again. She did not need to answer. He would know. The camera of the world drew back then through the window over the rain-washed street, into the dimming horizon where the city lights flickered like stars being born. And in that quiet expanse, her voice lingered, soft yet resolute. Have you ever mistaken patience for love? Share your story. Someone out there might need to hear your courage. Emily turned, slipped her hands into her coat pockets, and walked toward the door. The faint ticking of the pocket watch followed her, steady and alive. Outside, the rain had already stopped. The sky, washed clean, opened to light. A woman reborn stepped into the morning. In the quiet after every storm, there comes a moment when the wind forgets its anger and the sea returns to stillness. It is in that silence that truth begins to speak. Emily's story is not merely one of loss and revenge, but of rediscovery of learning that strength is not born in fury, but in the calm that follows. Her journey reminds us that patience is not the same as surrender, and forgiveness does not mean forgetting what hurt us. It means choosing peace without inviting harm again. When Emily let go of those who betrayed her, she did not lose. She reclaimed herself. She stopped measuring her worth through the eyes of others and began to see herself through the quiet, unwavering love her father left behind. The inheritance she carried was never the money, it was wisdom. The steady pulse of the pocket watch symbolized time itself, relentless, honest, and revealing. Time exposes what greed conceals, heals what pride destroys, and teaches that dignity, once reclaimed, is a fortune no one can steal. Perhaps that is what her father truly meant when he engraved those words, "Time reveals truth." Because in time, the masks fall, the noise fades, and what remains is what has always mattered: the courage to walk away, the grace to begin again, and the understanding that peace is the rarest form of wealth. So as you listen to her story, take a moment to reflect on your own. Have you ever mistaken silence for weakness? Have you ever stayed in places where your kindness was treated as currency? Emily's path reminds us that self-respect is not found in defiance, but in quiet clarity, the kind that says, "I will not be diminished." If her story touched something within you, share what it awakened. Somewhere, someone may need to hear that they are not alone, that starting over is not failure, but freedom. Leave your thoughts below. Let your voice be part of this quiet chorus of resilience. And if you wish to walk beside more stories like this, stories of truth, redemption, and the quiet courage that hides in ordinary hearts, stay with us. Each tale is a reflection of what it means to be human, fragile, flawed, yet still capable of beginning again. Because in the end, time reveals not only truth, but who we become once we choose to face it.